Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our fourth and final panel for the day, What Comes Next, moderated by Dennis Sheldon.
Do we start? Hello? Should we start? Let's start. Okay, welcome to the fourth panel. I'm Dennis Sheldon. This panel sort of had a placeholder called What Comes Next, and I think it's appropriate. We're going to talk about emerging technologies, but more importantly, I think we're going to talk about emerging models of value creation in the building delivery process. And I think every one of the panelists has a really unique background and a really unique organization that they're leading or participating in the development of, which explore, I would say, either enhancements to the traditional roles and the traditional building delivery value, or in some ways represent alternatives, maybe disruptions, all of that kind of good stuff. So it's a super interesting group with a really diverse background. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say about these topics. So just really quickly on my background, I'm one of the, I think everybody here is an architect originally, right? No, except for
I'm an engineer.
Sure. Engineer, okay, building professional. And I had a kind of an interesting set of experiences starting a startup and incubator out of an architectural practice, Frank Gehry's practice. Launched a company called Gehry Technologies, which pursued, I think, this idea of value creation and how you monetize and capitalize innovation coming out of an architectural firm. We had about maybe 5 pivots over 15 years as we moved from product to service to product to service, trying to figure out what exactly we were. Sold to Trimble in 2014, which is also a really interesting experience. Since then, my home base has been in academia and focused on that kind of academic and agency-based research. I co-direct 2 programs, one, the Case Center for Architecture, Science, and Ecology, and a second one called the EBIS Institute for Energy, Built Environment, and Smart Systems, that again, in its kind of way, pursues how you monetize innovation. Case, in particular, was started as a really unique venture between Professor Anna Dyson, whose name came up originally at Yale, now at Yale, and I've got to give out a shout to Carl Gaiotto and SOM, who created that original model of an architect-based design research innovation entity. Just suffice to say, Case has had a really interesting heritage around advanced building systems, alternative kind of carbon-reducing materials, biologically based or agricultural waste products used for building construction, recycled buildings, recycled components as building systems, et cetera. So really worked at the kind of the building systems innovation level. Because of my heritage, probably I've also kind of brought this idea of the open tech stack into our organization. One of my side roles is I co-direct the Building Smart International's technical group, along with Greg Schleusner, who also was here earlier. We're trying to take the open BIM data standard of IFC and migrate that into the kind of cloud-based microservices world of open data, so making that data accessible directly as opposed to just an exchange format, and using that for a whole host of projects internally and externally, including when you see around volatile organic compound analysis on the right. And then I would just say finally, the platform of academia, which I think, I probably I'm unique on this panel in having that perspective, but I do think that not-for-profit organizations, be they open standards bodies or academic programs, there's a kind of a unique model of how you create and launch innovation into the industry that probably you can't do through through commercial startups and more traditional companies. So but just suffice to say that I do advise a couple of startups that oddly are both in the building insurance world. One is I'm on the board of advisors of a company called Hosta Labs, which is using image-based recognition to develop takeoffs for either developing insurance policies or for measuring and mitigating risk, loss. And then the second one, InsurTech, is a loss control as a service company, which is trying to capitalize using IoT sensors and aggregating data and developing kind of interesting financial and insurance products that monetize the reduction of risk through better sensors and all that kind of stuff. So that's my background. I will turn it over next to Jennifer. Take it away.
Actually, I think Rob is next.
Yeah, I think I'm next. So I'm Rob Otani with CTO of Thornton Tomasetti. And what you're going to see in a hopefully very shortly is a little montage of some of the tools that we've created over the years. And that is to, at the end of the day, to add value to our clients. But it's really to create an ecosystem from ideation to development to research of what comes next. Not to be corny, but these are things that we've been doing for many, many years. So on the carbon side, I spoke in 2011 at the Green Build Conference to reduce embodied carbon in structures. So we've been talking about this for a long time. It's finally come to its path of where it should have been many, many years ago. This tool here we call Spotlight is a real-time takeoff and embodied carbon tool that we built in 2017, web-based app. Saves the database for the project so a project manager can dial in on their iPad or their phone and see where they are to make a decision as they're speaking to a client, as well as some very sort of broad-based cost estimation so that we sort of on a relative scale know which options are better. We have an AI team, and which you're going to show a little bit of that too. This is like our first tool, by the way. This one we call Skipper, which is something that I did by hand many, many years ago that we can do completely parametrically at a CD-based level. So this is one of our most popular tools in the office. And what you'll see here is in 2015, I spoke at a conference with Kate Simone and the Carbon Leadership Forum on embodied carbon. And our first machine learning tool is actually an embodied carbon calculator using machine learning. And that's what became Asterisk, which is a full building design tool for machine learning. And I will say, it was the first. We still use it today, but we've learned many, many lessons, and we're improving on that. So, which is why we have a whole AI and machine learning team, data scientists, PhDs, et cetera. And so we've sort of learned a ton from taking these risks, because you need to do that to learn what the next steps are going to be, what works, what doesn't work, both on a day-to-day basis as well as. And so that went to product. So this is a tool that we've built into TestFit.io. So that column machine learning app that we started in 2015 is now ended up in TestFit.io's platform. So this is an automation tool that we built for steel connection design, which we use on a day-to-day basis. This is 30 Hudson Yards. We used it on One Vanderbilt. But with the power of this is now we have really smart data. We're going to build those algorithms into our machine learning platforms such that we can start doing that level of detail the day we start the project. So I think that's the value.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer Downey, Director of Innovation at Turner Construction Company. If you want to go ahead and play our video, please feel free to be distracted by Spot walking around in the background while I talk to you. Turner is the largest general builder in the United States. We focus on a variety of projects of all sizes, most major market segments. And we really focus on the idea of we're known for our integrity, our safety, and our commitment to innovation. And one of the ways we drive innovation is through our innovation department. And part of what we do in the innovation department is we ask people to think beyond what is to what could be. And I think that's a particularly applicable statement to our panel today as we look towards the future and what's next. When we look at innovation at Turner, we have components of knowledge sharing and education, of opportunity seeking and solving, where we're leveraging a variety of innovation methodologies with our project teams to take ideas from conception through development and to testing and implementation. as well as our research and development programs where we're working with educational institutions, with third-party startups, and even developing our own startups with our new program like our Entrepreneur in Residence program. In the background, some of the fun videos in addition to Spot are videos from a variety of our pilot projects. You probably saw the versatile crane hook device. We just completed an exoskeleton pilot, really thinking about how we can leverage opportunities to work smarter and not necessarily always harder to help our trades as we support that aging workforce and provide opportunities for new trades or new people that want to enter the trades going forward. So as this wraps up, I think when we look at innovation at Turner, it's really focused on improving the lives of our people, of our trade partners, our design partners, and for our owners.
Awesome. I think I'm next. Great. Thanks, Jen. So, hi, I'm Matt Jezik, and I have a background in architecture, like we said before, from Autodesk, and then Tesla, and then a startup that we did called Foldstar, and then more recently at another EV company called Rivian. If you can just roll my tape. So I want to talk about 3 themes. What's next? Mass customization, vertical integration, and then transformative manufacturing are kind of areas that I think are relevant in this industry. So Kieran Timberlake, some of my idols, wrote a book in 2006, I think it was, about how to apply manufacturing into building. And yet here we are today still talking about building information modeling, which is really kind of the once-off. So how can we get back to this idea of building in a set of logic, and this is some examples from Autodesk that we worked on, that build in performance metrics and then take that to fabrication level, bill of materials, and then out to fabrication to support a mass customization type workflow. These are not new, but it's more than panelization or offsite construction. Vertical integration. So after I left Autodesk, I went to Tesla and wrote a lot of software and basically built gigafactories. So Elon talked about how to make a factory as a product, basically. And that's what we worked on. So this is the Gigafactory in Berlin, started from scratch, and within 2 years went from groundbreaking to a whole working factory that's pumping out Model Ys. And then from that, taking traditional manufacturing, like stamping and casting operations, and thinking about a more transformative manufacturing process. So how can we take something like flat sheets of material and fold them, which is a more efficient process than additive manufacturing or a lot of these stamping or casting operations. So current startup that we worked on over the last year took a lot of, outside of architecture in aerospace and automotive, taking concepts from traditional manufacturing and additive like metal 3D printing, combining them together to take the best of both worlds. So flat sheets of pre-manufactured materials, but folded using computational algorithms to come up with very efficient structures that can be done at scale. So you can literally build machines that will fold things in a repeating tessellated manner that create very strong, stiff, and lightweight structures, or adaptive to whatever shape you want, right? So using dynamic relaxation and sort of form fitting, taking those basic patterns and adapting them to whatever shapes, but still coming up with something that follows the rules of manufacturability and fabricatability and can tie into the machines that we've built. So literally in the startup, we build robots. We build CNC equipment that takes the algorithms from the software and turns them into large-scale machines that can take whatever material that comes in a flat sheet and folds it to come up with very strong performance structures. So that's really the high level, like the different themes that we're talking about, right? So getting back to how can we do mass customization? How can we think about vertical integration as opposed to these dispersed sort of processes in architecture? And then how can we think about transformative manufacturing that can scale, right? Like 3D printing buildings, sure, you can do it, but there have to be other ways to apply computation and logic and manufacturing with the materials that we typically use. So, thank you.
Amazing. Good morning, or midday. I'm Federico Negro. I am the CEO of a company called Canoa. We can roll the tape. We are a circular FF&E marketplace. My background is also in architecture. This is, I'll give a little bit of the history of why we ended up here. I started about 20 years ago now, showing my age, a company called Case, where we did a lot of the things that I think we are talking about today and mentioning in terms of how to build better, how to use technology, how to implement technology. We're helping a lot of folks in the industry. Maybe some of those folks are here to do that. At some point in 2015, we sold that company to WeWork, where I went on to head up design and construction there. And so both at Case and at WeWork, we got front row seats into what we would call retrofitting commercial real estate at scale looks like in the real world. So we are not at all in new construction. We are 100% in the retrofitting of existing buildings. And that's something that really I sort of fell in love with over my career. First at Case with a lot of retail clients, and then later on into the workplace effectively. Let's say, going from retail downstairs, upstairs into the office. Of course, at the moment, the office is being completely reinvented. It got totally punched in the gut over the last couple of years, and this gives us a huge opportunity to be, to really sort of push forward in terms of what this means. Now, what Canoa does is we're seeing an opportunity for us to change what traditionally in commercial real estate has been design and build and demolish, and then design, build, and demolish. And a lot of we sell directly into the tenants. And so a lot of what our clients are looking for is how do we go toward much lower waste structures? How do we lower the amount of construction waste and demolition waste by, say, 80-90% over the next 5 to 10 years? A lot of that, if we look at the overall structure of the overall building, most of the waste that is generating in mature, what we would call mature cities, actually comes in what's happening in all of those millions of square feet of floor plates. That's really what we focus on. And so all of these companies from an ESG perspective want to go toward lower carbon models, lower waste models. We're focused 100% on the waste side of that. How do we deploy spaces that are lower carbon by definition? Because number one, they are built for reuse, they're designed for reuse. And number two, they effectively design out a lot of the things that would end up in a landfill anyway. So our tech is really simple. It's I've often you saw it's like a little app where we can sort of move chairs around. But it's a full-blown design platform for FF&E only that allows these customers to be able to both manage their spaces and buy stuff. So imagine if you can just buy the stuff that's on your screen. That's us. So we are one of the only companies that really were introducing this concept that we can merge CAD and a marketplace business together. Why can't we just effectively cut out a lot of that middle that happens and pull in both existing inventory from a circularity perspective as opposed to the new inventory we want, be able to manage it, be able to move it, be able to manage the second life, the third life, and then end of life as well. That's us.
Excellent, great. All right, well, so let's get into some discussion. Coincidentally or fortuitously, somehow this panel breaks into kind of two clusters of two, right? Jennifer and Robert, you guys represent incubators, call it, I'm going to use sort of a placeholder term, right? An incubator or innovation organization in a traditional large, medium to large player. And then Matt and Federico, you're much more on this kind of weird product service conundrum side of things, right? So let's start with Robert and Jennifer first. This question about how you invest, capitalize, monetize innovation coming out of traditional firms, right? So maybe you guys can both talk about the genesis of these organizations, how much of it, to what extent is this internally focused value creation, but then both have this kind of external investment that moves beyond your organization? What does it feel like to be doing that? There's always this question about, am I arming my competitors, right? I mean, shouldn't we just, invest as much as we can based on our traditional fees? Is that enough? Maybe you guys can both talk about your organizations from that perspective. What does that kind of incubation, IP generation look like from this kind of vehicle?
Should I start? I can start there. So I think we started sort of our automation / core incubation long time ago. Probably even I have a strange history. I'm a boomerang from Thornton Tomasetti. I started at Thornton Tomasetti. So I remember about the time that I left, actually, the first time, it was Tom that was making all the engineers model in 3D AutoCAD, because BIM didn't exist. Because it was a way to define or explain to a contractor how the complexity of a building without having to review 100 structural drawings, which is not easy. So it kind of started then, and then I think there was a project, the Barclay Center, when we had to work with Digital Project, Tekla, and Revit. And we didn't want to do it 3 times, we just wanted to do it once. So we created these integrators, these connectors, interoperability solutions using their APIs. So we only had to do one. And then we just said push the button and all 3 would be created. So we solved the problem of production and QA/QC, if you will, because we're not manually doing these things. And then I think the R&D part came when we merged with Weidlinger, there was IP at the time. And even just the concept of IP in an engineering services firm is kind of a new concept in a way. So, but we realized that there's a lot of smart people in the office. That's our sort of strength. How do you unleash that into something to solve, at scale, the industry problems? And so we started our R&D program called Core Lab, we call it. And so anybody in the firm could submit an idea and have that idea be funded. And most of the time, it's sort of incremental improvements. But guess what? Those are huge. When you talk about a 1,500-person firm, that's a lot. And then some get to product that are sort of outside the sort of normal realm of what we do in the office to something that could scale globally. And we've done that as well. So it's an interesting journey that we've taken, and we're not finished yet. But I think there's some fruits there.
Yeah. When we think about the concept of taking something from an idea to development, I think that takes lots of different forms within Turner, but one of the ways that we do that is with our Innovation Challenge program. And this actually grew out of a previous program called the Award for Innovation, which was a idea submission and award program. And over the years of the initial program, we received lots of ideas from lots of people across Turner, and because there are lots of people trying to solve those everyday problems, right? But the challenge with that was that we gave them an award, and then that was the end of it. And we heard from people that they really wanted to see things move to those next steps. So we grew the Innovation Challenge program out of that process. And so with that, there is still an ideation phase, but that's really just the very beginning. And from the idea submission phase, and even that is, it's not just open in terms of, whatever idea you can think of. We like to have different categories of areas that we're focusing on, because you can innovate on anything, but what we really want to do is focus our efforts and our attentions to the areas where we're going to get the most impact from that. So we go through an ideation phase, and from that we identify thought leaders within the different categories. And then we bring them together for a series of design sprint workshops, which are really where we start to grow these ideas from beyond just an individual's idea to this collective idea that the group has grown together. And it's a really fun collaborative process because you get to watch the group collaborate with other people that have similar ideas and challenges and just passions around bringing change in the industry. And from that process, we form typically several different working groups that come out of an individual workshop. And that launches the big next phase of development and testing and iteration and checking to make sure that we are indeed providing something that's helpful. I think one of the big challenges we often see is that they fall in love with their idea. And we talk about, the idea of love the problem, not the solution. Because once you've invested a huge amount of effort, but also sort of emotional investment, right? That people love what they've built. And so, that can be good because it can drive you, but at the same time, it can make it so that you don't necessarily see that maybe you're not providing the value that you originally set out to do. So as we continue this process and then move into scaling across the organization, I talked about Turner being the largest general builder in the United States, which is great, but also it comes with its own challenges in that scaling across an organization as large as ours has a lot of inherent challenges, right? We have over 40 offices across the United States as well as international offices, and then each of those have, hundreds of projects easily going on at any time. And so the challenge becomes very much like that of a startup, of how do you sell into the organization and provide the value for the people across the company. So I think, when we think about what that process looks like, and then does it even go beyond what we're doing at Turner? And in some cases it can, in some cases it doesn't. I think it just depends on what the problem is that's being solved. But it's funny because when you asked that question, it reminded me a lot of actually the way that we see interactions with startups as well, that our value can't be the ability to buy software, because pretty much everyone has that ability, right? How do we leverage the tool in a different way to bring a unique value proposition to our clients and to our owners and our subcontractors? So I think it's actually the same question of whether it's something that we've developed, from an idea that came from within Turner, or if it's something that we're working with a third-party startup.
Great. I've got a ton of follow-up questions, but let's bring Matt and Federica into this. So both of you, again, have this interesting sort of evolution where you've been, I think, building professionals, but then on the software side, and then on this kind of scalable building product as a service. Anyway, and I think those questions again about, product versus service were evolving, or is the building a product? And those are super germane to both of your evolutions. But there's something about also scale that fits into what you guys have done, right? And in some ways, I think there's a lot of effort around productization of buildings, modular construction, whatever. All of them, I think, hit this question about in order for that to succeed, there's a level of scale that has to be hit. And I think both of you guys have really interesting experiences on that. Maybe you can talk about a couple of the companies you've been involved with and how you guys have navigated that scale product service kind of model. And maybe make it from there.
Do you want to go, or I'll go?
Yeah, sure. Look, for me, this is that's actually really the perfect question, because it's people ask me why FF&E all the time, because I didn't start there, right? Like it wasn't, one day I woke up and decided that this is, but it is for me the smallest atomic built thing that interacts with the human. And the beauty about it is that it's movable. We get to move it. We get to use it in different ways. And so I'm not the first person to say it, but really, like, the smallest building is the chair. And so all of this has to do with scalability. I'd say the core difference between what I'm doing now at Kanoa, which I will relate to what we're doing at WeWork, is that the experience of shifting from Case to WeWork was that all of a sudden I went from a services business to a product business. And what we're building at Kanoa is a business. It's not a technology, it's a business. And so to your point about, love the problem, not the solution, the only reason why Kanoa exists is to decarbonize. That's it. And we're going to try to get there in whatever way we can. And I think the big thing that I believe, and the reason why I decided to start this company is because I believe now, coming into the third decade of this century, that there is a huge opportunity, quite literally a gold rush, to refactor all of the 20th century businesses into better, cleaner versions of themselves for the 21st business. And so I see a ton of people out there working on all of these kinds of things, and prefab and all, like, all amazing. But there's a gigantic blind spot in this particular sector. Nobody was doing anything with FF&E. Nobody was really doing anything with interiors. And so that's what forced, what didn't force us. That's what made us really excited to go in that direction. To get really down to the point of your question, though, the distinction of a service versus a product comes in that like a service can be anything, right? A service can is what I like to say. It's like it's a creative enterprise. It can be an optimization enterprise. We got really good at serving, at selling people services in the sense that really what you're doing is saying like, well, I've developed some sort of know-how, some sort of experience, and I can leverage that, right, to create a business, to help others, but also to make money out of it. A product is fundamentally different in that it has to scale, right? It's something that has to be sold over and over and over, many times, thousands of times even, or millions of times even. And so, of course, the benefit is that there's no cap on it, right? We only have so many hours to sell. And so it is a different way of thinking about a business, and quite frankly, once I saw this side of it, for me, it was really no going back. I love that contact with the customer. And I love the fact that, like, I'm an optimizer, I think, by nature. And the fact that I get to do the exact same thing over and over again ad nauseum, for me, is wonderful. It's a very, very both creative, but incredibly sort of peaceful enterprise. Like, I feel like, we just get to be better and better and better.
Yeah, I think kind of picking up on that, so I left architecture in 1999, right? So we did the Revit startup, Charles River Software, in 1999, and then sold it to Autodesk in 2001, 2002. So we basically built Revit. So that I was using AutoCAD and doing traditional CAD stuff and building buildings, and so there has to be a better way. So we did the 3D thing, we did the parametric modeling, we did building information modeling, we did all the other shuns of optimization, simulation, fabrication, all this stuff. Putting stuff in the cloud, having data accessible, making the information available, all the things that we've talked about. But then what do you do after that, right? So like the industry has changed, and a lot of the colleagues that we've all worked together on these things over the years. The interesting thing for me is that the fragmented aspects of AEC weren't going away with technology, and that's been addressed or talked about in previous sessions. Chris and other people have talked about that a lot. So what can we do about that? How can you look at different industries that are actually different? Manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, and traditionally, traditional manufacturing in automotive is very tiered, right? There's OEMs and sort of first tier and second tier distributors and sort of people like that. But a newer model of this vertically integrated company that can move faster, right? Can innovate quickly, can, in the case of like a chip shortage, turn on a dime and source different chips, change the circuit board and not lose a beat from a production standpoint, right? So you get that agility by having more things in-house and sort of under your umbrella. That's interesting, and that's a good model that I think other people should start following. So that's one of the reasons why I went to Tesla and started doing things there. In addition to just building product, having literally an AEC company, architects, engineers, and contractors under one roof, because you're the owner-operator, it's a different model than traditional products and service, which actually ties to a lot of what Fed was talking about with WeWork too, right? So the difference from like going from shop to case to WeWork for you is actually a very similar progression of like traditional design firm to sort of design tech, service to product. And that's kind of the same model that I've fallen. The next part of that is how do you scale and how do you take out some of the other inefficiencies in the process, which is a total long tail operation, right? So it's the decarbonization aspect. It's how do you think about building differently, applying manufacturing processes to AEC, which is, I haven't solved that yet. That's a hard problem, and if anybody knows
so
how
why
to do
is
that.
And let me just, I mean, one thing that I was going to ask is, I think I have not seen, a scalable innovation kind of integrated company that has not hit the wall. The fact is, you got to build these things in a local place. There are local players. Those players have traditional value positioning. I'm trying not to say general contractor, but but there are entrenched models that you have to deal with. You can't just recreate. I mean, even at the scale of WeWork and Tesla, I think you still have to merge into these traditional stakeholder models. And to what extent has that been either an impediment, or how have you been able to get around that? And certainly, Jennifer, weigh in on the contractor side. I think the question about how the contractor evolves is probably the stickiest wicket in the whole business in some ways, because so much of the risk and the mechanics of delivering these things really falls on you guys, right?
I think it's. Sorry to jump.
No.
I just want to jump in. I think it has to do with what the ultimate goal is. I would be a little bit worried to say that the fragmentation of the industry is bad. It's actually a feature of our industry, not a bug of it, in a way. And so I think the moment we understand these things, I think that we can say, look, Turner has tremendous vertical integration in the things that it can do really well and ultimately drive its business. The same, WeWork at its time did the same. I think all of these are simply business decisions, which, by the way, will vary over time, over the decades, right? And so I love history and anything that has to do with, say, industrialized construction, especially in the house building sector, in between the wars and right after World War II. Like, it was tremendous, right? And most of the big players today still actually are alive as a result of that huge shift that came forward. And so I think that what we're trying to do, bringing it back to sort of this question about, like, how do we bring ourselves into those models? I think that there is it has to be driven by what really ultimately your business objectives need to be. And at the moment, housing in general, if we're going to go in that route in terms of prefab, like, that's a really mature market and it's really difficult to get into it. And that's just the nature of it. Now, I love prefab and I love the sort of concept of it and all that kind of stuff. I'd say, like, the reason why we decided to go in interiors is because prefab for interiors is so much easier. Like, there's no water, there's no rain, right? There's a lot of these things that we have to learn to navigate in a way. And I think that the biggest issue of all that we often don't talk about when it comes to sort of all of the legal requirements around local compliance is just really the land issue. Like, it's a very different thing to build in the 21st century, in the third decade, than it was in the middle of the 20th century. There's a lot less land that is cheaply available today, and so we are facing different context, and so I don't find it that surprising that it's so much more difficult today. I think that the bar is higher, but we are also 100 years on, right? And so we should hold a higher bar to ourselves, and we have to figure out really what we're trying to do. There were 2.6 billion people on this earth during World War II. We're above 7, and we'll be close to 10 soon. We have to house them all. We have to give them all really great working environments, play environments, educational environments. This is our industry's job to figure out.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow up on Fed mentioned about the 100-year-old industry. Our standard of care is actually over 100 years old. So the standard of care of like the division of SD, DD, CDs, permit drawings, construction, and all those barriers in between is over 100 years old. So the fact that we're still sort of married to that system, I tell the story that I've been signing and sealing drawings for structural buildings in New York City since 1997, 2000 or something. I got my license in 1997. I've had one comment from the building department. So the question is, do I really need to create that permit set the way that we've been doing it for so many years and spend hundreds of hours doing it? Probably not, right? And that goes across all disciplines. So in many ways, I think I don't even care about the permit. I'll print out a set of drawings whenever you want to. They're not looking at it. They're looking at very specific things. They're not looking at whether that's a W14 by 500 or W14 730. They don't care. So I think we need to think about what is the value or the information or the data that is required at a particular time for the client to make a decision to build upon a design such that it can be built. And that requires construction information, it requires sourcing. It's the verticalization aspect that Matt was referring to. And I think that's a huge problem what we do. I've talked to Turner and I've talked to Suffolk, and I said, why aren't you guys involved in when we're designing the buildings to let us know how much it costs in real time, or how much is it buildable? Mm-hmm. It's like they don't get paid for it. They don't get paid for that.
Right. So, I think a couple things. Yeah, this thing that linearization, right? The linearization of the process is driven by a value proposition around impoverished information, right? You only do so much in schematic design.
Yeah,
why?
yeah,
Because
exactly.
Repeating is hard, and yet it's not hard. It's certainly not as hard as it was, right? To do this stuff concurrently. So why do you guys think that no entity has been able to come in and just monetize that value change and just blow away huge parts of it? Or maybe they have. I don't know.
Because the business model is not aligned for it.
But why not just come up with another business model? There's oceans of money have come in.
I think that's what we're talking about. Is that like, if we get, I'm going to be super blunt. I tell this to my architect friends all the time. Like, we only use technology to drive design further, not to make design cheaper. That's it.
Or better.
Right. And so great. Better buildings, of course, mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean that it's more accessible for more people. If anything, quite the opposite, right? We've been going very much in the opposite direction, and so if our business model is incentivized to drive the hours, 100% of those hours will be used, right? Let's just sort of, that's the reality of it.
But again, that's sort of local optimization, right? Architects are optimizing for their scope, right? And then along comes a WeWork or a Tesla.
We didn't count hours at WeWork because we sold something completely. We didn't sell our knowledge. We sold something else, right? And so that's the power of it. It's not applicable to everything. I'm not one of those people who says this is wrong. It's like, no. If you're building a super tall, you're building a stadium, you're doing a hospital, these buildings are really hard. That model might be totally fine as best as you could do it with the best teams. There are some sectors, however, that are very ripe for productization, and I think single and multifamily, I think the workplace, I think these, frankly, and we know that it works because we've had it for a few hundred years. That the workplace has always been very repetitive, and so has housing. I don't know, I live in New York, I live in Brooklyn, and my house is the same as everybody else's house all around me for miles and miles, and so it's the model.
So Jen.
I think Matt used a really important word earlier, and it was agility. And one of the things that as an industry we lack is agility. And I think that has a lot to do with sort of who holds what information, because nearly every decision in the building industry has huge implications. There's just even the simplest design decision of picking a material or a piece of furniture, right? The ripple effects are so massive that it's really hard for individuals to make those decisions. And at its core, that's actually one of our biggest challenges, is that either lack of information or siloing of information. And that in turn, has all these other additional effects. And I also think that the number of decisions or the factors that are going to play into decisions are going to only continue to increase going forward. So this morning they were talking about, at Sidewalk Labs, about the number of decisions that are coming into zoning a building and things like that, and with daylighting and wind and sun and all that kind of stuff. And as we add in additional, as we learn new things about wanting to reduce carbon or understanding things about the supply chain that right now we don't have that information, but as that opens up, right, we start to learn about where our materials come from and the labor practices behind them, and all of a sudden you have this whole new decision-making process that you have to layer in. And so when we think about those opportunities, it's how do we enable people to make better, more informed decisions so that they can feel confident and have that agility, to move forward in the project.
And that does go back to contractual issues. So like, if they're an owner that needs to make a decision about, like a mechanical system or something that is not going to happen until DD, we're screwed, basically. The engineer's screwed because we got to change our structure to adapt to some other mechanical system. So I think that's why, and it was spoken about on a previous panel, we need to use the data from the past projects to inform day one, like, is this better or worse, at a minimum, than some other, if we're optimizing in early stages. We don't necessarily need to know exactly to 4 digits of what a certain metric is, but we need to know what's better, what's worse, and I think that's we need to do more of, and that's where potentially machine learning come in, but at a minimum, data analytics and data visualization play into.
Okay, so final kind of comments, what comes next? Spin forward, each of you, to when the movie ends, right? When is that, and what's the end of the movie for you?
Well, I was going to predict that what comes next is lunch.
We're not even late yet.
I felt that was a really solid prediction. One of the great things about predicting the future is that you can really never be wrong. We can always sort of backpedal later. But I think the future is around automation. It's around the planet and the people on this planet. I think more and more we're going to see technology and decisions that are being made to support, how we support our own sustainability of the next generations.
Yeah, I think from my end, it's pretty similar, where if you look at the same model that the Fed talked about, like 9-10 billion people, they got to go somewhere. There's an energy problem, there's a densification problem. We've all talked about these before. How do you think about a machine for living that is scalable? It doesn't mean that architecture has to be commoditized, but how do you take the systems and make them super efficient and much more approachable and adaptable for the reuse cases that Fed mentioned before as well.
So do you think the market forces are just going to create the impetus that this has to be solved?
No, I don't think. I think that we didn't even talk about like market movers, right? So like one benefit of vertical integration is that you do have heft in the industry, and other people will kind of go where you want them to go, right? So Turner has a lot of weight. We work. I mean, how many factories did you guys buy out to do all the storefront? That was like buying out the production capacity of multiple factories to support an existing process is a really significant, profound thing. How do you use that for your benefit and for society's benefit? I think is an interesting opportunity that we're not taking advantage of.
I don't know.
Well, let me. You focus on a very specific problem, right? But I know you have world domination, like the rest of us. So where does it? Once you've knocked that one down.
It's not world domination. That's fine. Through chairs. No, look. I think the only thing that I would say is that I look at our industry and it's all of the opportunity. Right, and I would say the only thing I would say with certainty that I hope is that fee for service goes from being 99% of the way in which this industry works to maybe 50%. I think new business models is fundamentally the biggest innovation that we need, more so than all of the trinkets that we all make. It's just, we have to deliver more, we have to deliver it better, we have to deliver it 10x cheaper, and we have to deliver it without completely destroying our environment. Like that's all I see. Like our world is literally on fire, and right now, we all go out into the world and say, I have 40 hours a week, and the highest bidder gets them, and everybody else sort of gets screwed. That's not an efficient vehicle for us to bring our spatial experience out into the world. We need more scalable models to be able to package that design and that experience into something that can reach more people.
And I do think the kind of capital-driven model is one way of breaking that cycle, right? I mean, if you get, I mean, again, there's an incredible amount of money in the world kind of looking for problems to solve. It's newly coming to our industry. And in some ways, if you need to get over the kind of the initial investment hump, there are people that will help you do that, right?
Yeah.
Robert, any last
Including
questions?
them.
Yeah, I think it's getting to Jen's point, it's automation in the form of significantly leverages machine learning and AI to get to that solution. So the dream for me would be that the day the client wants a project, they'll have their 3 potential site options using one of these tools and the associated engineering metrics and the associated carbon, all those things in front of them. And then it just becomes a configurator at the end of the day, using the experience of all these firms that are here, which I think actually is possible.
Just, sorry, one more question on for you as a consultancy. That disrupts the hourly service model.
It
right?
does.
What does that do to Thornton Thomas?
But that's an interesting thing. So those services that are essentially embedded in an app can be monetized. So it's not talked about too much, but like, what does it mean if I have Tom Scarangello or Jeff Callow's, sort of smarts embedded in an app? It's actually possible. We've toyed around with natural language processing and things, but that's going to be a method of harnessing, sort of conversational data, which people, Tom is good at, and Jeff is really good at, into an app. Coupled with sort of algorithmic things that we already have, it becomes really, really powerful. So it's, I actually don't think it's that hard. It's time-consuming, but it's actually not hard, conceptually not hard either.
Just need the virtual Tom Scarangello and then...
Exactly. There'll be the virtual, 300 people that are here. It's possible. So.
I think maybe we should, let's go have lunch, huh? Continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's make my prediction come true.
Let me just offer a couple of, so you guys get to end the speaking portion today, and I agree with you, lunch is definitely next. So thank you. Please give them another round of applause. And all of our panelists for today. We learned a lot today. I'm more excited about our future than I was this morning. I am a little bit more confused in some places about our future as well, because there's so many things that came out of today. And our team and Carlo and Kate have been sitting there, and Rich, listening and taking notes. We're going to be putting out a report on today's conference, and a lot of it is going to be on what's next. What do we do next? What do we look like next? How does this industry continue? Tom mentioned something to me during one of the breaks about 3 years ago when we did our first Ascend conference. It was really about aspirational goals and what's happening. And 3 years later, obviously, we're living in a very different place than we lived yesterday or the day before. And I don't know if there are any West Wing fans in the room, one of my favorite shows. And if you were a fan of it, you know the final scene is very simple. President Bartlet sitting on his plane going back to New Hampshire, and the First Lady, and they're sitting quietly, and she looks at him, and he's gazing out the window, and she says, what are you thinking about? And he just says, tomorrow. And I think one of the things we learned today is that tomorrow is very fastly approaching. It's maybe here already. And it's the people that we heard from today, people like our chairman, Ralph Esposito from Suffolk, our board members, the chairs of this council, that are going to really help us understand what the tomorrow means for this industry. And I think the Building Congress will continue to play a role in helping all of us bring together what tomorrow means and bring together the industry. So I really thank you on behalf of our chairman, our board, again, to the staff at the Building Congress that put this together, Alana, George, and the entire team. Thank you. If you are not a Building Congress member, please join. Our membership is growing and it's exciting and we're doing wonderful things. Come to our events, read about what we do, read our reports, and now go and enjoy lunch and have a great day. Thank you, everybody.